Chapter 4, Section 2 is angle relationships and triangles. And we start out by classifying triangles by side length. Equilateral triangle has 3 congruent sides. An isosceles triangle has 2 congruent sides. And a scalene triangle has no congruent sides. I'm going to draw something like that. Equilateral is 3 congruent sides, isosceles is 2 congruent sides, and scalene is no congruent sides. So first one we look at is triangle EHF. From E to H is 12. From F to H is 10, because these both have tick marks. So these two sides are both 10s. So this is an isosceles triangle. B, E, H, G. Well, this side is 12. This side is 11. And this entire side would be 14. So that is scalene. Over here, triangle ABC. This is 15. They both have tick marks, so that is also 15. And this one has been labeled 15. So 3 equal sides. That is equilateral. And triangle ACD, ACD, this is 15, this is 18, and this is 5. All 3 different sides, so that is scalene. In example 2, they're going to give us some triangles. This is isosceles. That means these 2 sides are equal. So we would say 4x minus 10.7 equals 2x plus 6.3. We subtract 2x from both sides, and you have 2x minus 10.7 equals 6.3. And we then add 10.7 to both sides, and 2x equals 17, so x will be 8.5, and our side lengths then, 4 times 8.5 minus 10.7 is 23.3, 2 times 8.5 plus 6.3 is also 23.3, and 5 times 8.5 plus 2 is 44.5. So the 2 sides were equal. We solved for x and then substituted it back in. Letter B is equilateral, so all 3 of these sides are equal. So it doesn't really matter which 2 we pick. And I'm going to pick these 2 simply because they're the lowest numbers. So 3y minus 4 equals 2y plus 3. From there, you can subtract 2y from both sides, and that would be y minus 4 equals 3. Adding 4 to both sides, you have y equals 7. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 3 is 17. 5 times 7 is 35, minus 18 is 17. And 3 times 7 is 21, minus 4 is 17. And example C, it's kind of hard to see. Those two both have tick marks. And I think it's also kind of hard to see some decimal points here. So these two things are equal. X plus 3.2 equals 4x minus 1.3. From there, you subtract x from both sides, and you have 3.2 equals 3x minus 1.3. And then you add 1.3 to both sides, and you have 4.5 equals 3x. And when you divide both sides by 3, x equals 1.5. Of course, we're not done yet. 5 times 1.5 minus 0.2 is 7.3. 1.5 plus 3.2 is 4.7. And 4 times 1.5 minus 1.3 is also 4.7. Letter D, we have a tick mark on all of these, which means it's an equilateral triangle. All three things are equal. So 5x minus 1 equals 4x plus 1. From there, you subtract 4x from both sides. X minus 1 equals 1. Adding 1 to both sides, x equals 2. 5 times 2 is 10. Minus 1 is 9. 4 times 2 is 8. Plus 1 is 9. And even though there's no equation right here, that would also be 9 because they all have tick marks on them. We need to draw a triangle in here, and it's going to be an isosceles triangle, which means these two things are going to be equal, and those two things are going to be called the legs. This is going to be called the base, and these are going to be called base angles. The base angles are the angles that are by the base, and up here this is called the vertex angle. And we have two theorems here. First one is the isosceles triangle theorem, and this says if two sides of a triangle are congruent, then the opposite angles are congruent. So if we have a triangle right here that is isosceles and these are congruent, then we can say that these angles are congruent. And then the converse, or the opposite of that, is true. If two angles in a triangle are congruent, then the two sides, opposite sides, are congruent. So if we have these angles that are congruent, then we can say the sides are congruent. So we're either going to have two angles or two sides that are congruent. Looking at example A, these sides are congruent. That means these angles have to be congruent. So you will be able to do 180 minus 22, and there's 158 degrees to be divided evenly between those. So those angles are both 79 degrees. Angle B, these sides are congruent. So these base angles are congruent. So 3x equals x plus 44. We will subtract x from both sides, and you have 2x equals 44, and x equals 22. To find this angle measure then, 22 plus 44 is 66 degrees. Letter C, since these sides are congruent, these angles will also be congruent. 180 minus 48 is 132. So you have 132 degrees to be divided evenly between those two, and you end up with 66 degrees. Letter D, since these sides are congruent, these angles are also congruent. So 6y equals 8y minus 16. Subtracting 8y from both sides, you have negative 2y equals negative 16. And when you divide both sides by negative 2, y equals 8. And then to figure out angle N, 6 times 8 is 48 degrees. We have the equilateral triangle corollary, and this should be the converse of the equilateral triangle corollary. I'm sorry, equilateral and equiangular, they both basically kind of say the same thing. First one says, if you start out with an equilateral triangle, so if all three sides are congruent, that means that it is equiangular. And the next one says, if it's equiangular, or all three of the angles are congruent, then it is also equilateral. So with any triangle, if the three sides are equal, then the three angles are equal. And if the three angles are equal, then the three sides are equal. So using that down here, we have three sides. Those are equal. That means the angles will all be equal. And that means the angles are all 60 degrees. So 2x plus 32 equals 60 degrees. Subtracting 32 from both sides, you have 2x equals 28. And when you divide both sides by 2, x equals 14. Letter B, these three angles are congruent, so that means the sides are congruent. So 5y minus 6 equals 4y plus 12. You are going to subtract 4y from both sides, and that becomes y minus 6 equals 12. And adding 6 to both sides, y equals 18. Letter C, three angles are equal. That means the three sides are equal. So we will say 2t plus 1 equals 4t minus 8. From there you will subtract 2t from both sides, and that becomes 1 equals 2t minus 8. Adding 8 to both sides, you have 9 equals 2t, and t equals 4.5. We were asked to find the length of JL, so 2 times 4.5 is 9, plus 1 is 10. And all three of those sides would have a length of 10.